Oh shoot, I forgot to make you a moderator, but yeah. So many details. Oh, okay. Thank you. Co-host. Hi, everybody. And everybody. Welcome on in. I wonder if Hello, welcome everybody in the chat. I can't really see it, huh?
Bad tattoos on leather tan skin. Jesus Christ on a plastic sign.
Actually, let me, before I forget, I'm gonna record to this computer too.
Riding roads doing manual drive. Bad tattoos on leather tan skin. Jesus Christ on a plastic sign. Early nights and white sheets with lace curtains. Capri in the distance.
Okay.
Bad tattoos on leather tan skin. Jesus Christ on a plastic sign. All in love again and again. Winding roads doing manual drive. Bad tattoos on leather tan skin. Jesus Christ on a plastic sign. All in love again and again. Winding roads doing manual drive. Early nights and white sheets with lace curtains. Capri in the distance. In a place that can make you change. All in love again and again. Early nights and white
Recording on my computer too, so.
Capri in the distance. In a place that can make you change. All in love.
You don't hear audio? Oh, it was you. Okay, don't scare me like that. Yeah, happy Friday, everybody. I hope everyone had a great week. Oh, it's okay. I wish everyone in the room could see the chat too, but it's fine. Cool, I'm just gonna give it a few minutes. Yes. And Sanaya, who's moderating today, just added a little reminder to, put your questions in the Q&A section of the chat. And then, reserve the chat box for just general comments and general chit-chat. How is everyone's music making this week? Working on. Yay for week 3. I know, I can't believe it's week 3 already. So wild. Oh, is this not okay? I'm just gonna test something out real quick. Okay, good. Sorry, it's chaotic. I just want to make sure audio is coming in through somewhere else on my computer. Yeah, the new tools are helpful but tricky to work. Yeah, I will say like some of them are like more finicky, I think, than others, and it kind of just takes practice. But you know, I think they're just tools, and you can kind of just like use them, and however you want to use them. But yeah, it's kind of cool that they exist. All right. Yeah, Jamie mentioned, I think once I know the troubleshooting with time, it will be easy. Yeah, I think it's one of those things too. It's just like whenever, let me turn this down. When a new version of software comes out, they are like continuously putting out updates. And I feel like in the beginning, there are certain things that are just kind of like finicky, but then like over time, they'll like add updates and newer features that kind of like make things easier. So, but yeah, with like the Stacks tool, for example, I've been finding that it's a little finicky, but I've just kind of figured out workflows that kind of work, you know, and then like, I don't know, like I've been really struggling with like music making this week. Just really been working through some creative blocks, and like it was like yesterday, I was like, I don't like any of the chord progressions that it's coming up with. So I just like went to my go-to and just came up with like a bass line first and then just like stacked notes up on top of the bass and just classic using your ears kind of thing, and that worked for me. So yeah, I think they're just tools that exist. You can kind of figure out what works for you moment to moment. Oh, I think people are here. Yeah, all software is definitely like that for sure. Okay, I'm gonna pause the music here. I think someone just arrived. Oh yay! Hi, welcome on in. Hi. Oh, hello. Take a seat anywhere you want. I guess I don't need to do that right now. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. I hope that everyone had a okay time with the homework or just general music making or just a good general week. It's Cancer season now. Can you believe it? It's also apparently, I think it's a full moon tonight. So special kind of energy. But yeah, today, let me go ahead and switch over here. Today should be pretty fun because, well, first of all, I'm going to just touch on a few things from last week. And then we're going to be going over Ableton Live's instruments and effects, which is like my fave because I feel like, yeah, finding sounds that you like and tweaking sounds, adding effects, things like that. Sound design is how you can kind of like shape your general sonic world and sound, which I find to be really important. And yeah, to start with, I did want to, let me just go ahead and search for here, is I wanted to review a little bit of like last week. First of all, I wanted to take questions in the chat and also in person if there have any things that have come up in the past couple of weeks or just general things that you are stuck on or have questions about. I don't know. We're talking about the blurry stuff again. So, hi, welcome on in. So let me pull up live. Yeah, unfortunately for those of you who are new in the chat, oh my God, it's totally fine. It's not you. Because we have a fancy tech setup here at the Ableton Live spaces that we're streaming from. We're not doing like the typical like screen zoom sharing, so we're basically using this like device as like the video or whatever. But anyways, in short, unfortunately, I think there's only so much that we can do about the blurriness, although I'm like looking at it on my end and it doesn't look that blurry. Is it really blurry for you?
It's about the same as last time.
Okay.
I think it's followable.
Huh. I mean, I'm looking at it on my computer. Maybe it's just like I have bad eyesight, so this is just like the norm for me.
It'll be different on yours, I think.
Oh, right. That does make sense, actually. The notes are unreadable. Okay. Well, yeah, it's a bummer, but so for the recordings, by the way, so this is being recorded right now. It will look clear in the recordings, and then also you can totally follow along. This is on Teachable, so you can just follow along with the notes on your end, and that should be fine. The letters are not okay. Well, I apologize for that, but we're gonna just make do with what we've got. Yeah.
There's a question which says, is it okay to post homework that is not totally complete or in timeline?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Can people upload homework even if it's not done? Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to share like what you've been working on. Yeah, I think that also helps with accountability. It's just, yeah, sharing whatever you've got up to that point. Great question. Yeah.
I was wondering, it's my first time at the live, this in-person one, how do we log into the Wi-Fi?
Oh, okay. So there's a question about Wi-Fi in here.
We might actually request you to not log into
I wonder though, because this is hardwired.
Or do we need it for...
You don't need it because, like, for me, like, I'm going to be sharing the note. Like, this is very clear for you. It's just like people on Zoom can't read it super well.
Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, okay.
I thought we needed it.
Okay, we're good. Any other questions in the chat or nothing? Okay. But yeah, for anyone who's just like filed into the room, in the Zoom room, yeah, it is going to be a little bit blurry, but for the notes, if I'm like sharing the notes, I would recommend just pulling it up on your end on Teachable on your computer. And then with Ableton, I've zoomed in quite a bit, so this should be fine. It's like 155%, so hopefully. Yeah, and then again, we're recording this, so like when the recordings are uploaded, it's probably going to be a lot clearer. So, but yeah, thank you for your patience. I very much appreciate it. All right, so the first thing that I wanted to go over was I know that I've gone over a little bit in terms of like workflow in Ableton Live and how to, first of all, come up with ideas in session view and then record them to arrangement view. So I just wanted to show you a couple of project examples where I kind of used like slightly different workflows. So this first one is kind of the one that I've been showing you the past couple of weeks, where basically I just like created, you can see there's quite a few tracks here, all these different tracks, so like drum rack, hats loop, which contains a sample, and some of these, by the way, like I just kind of created tracks when I was in session view and just like literally just was like in the flow coming with ideas, and maybe I didn't use those ideas later on, but like, yeah, there's a bass track here, and I can hear myself. Oh, okay. But yeah, I literally just like came up with all of these different clips here, and then came up with different clips on different tracks, and then inevitably just started to organize those clips into scenes, right? So like this is a scene. So basically I click on the play button, it launches any clips on that row or scene. And then I created another scene, which is like a second part of the intro. Basically, the only difference is I added chords. And then this third intro scene here, where the kick comes in, right? So basically these are like just like loosely arranged scenes that I created. And then I ended up recording it into the arrangement view here. So, and I showed you how to do that last week, but I wanted to show you another example where I didn't necessarily do it that way, where I mostly I came up with like a few ideas in session view, but mostly created everything in arrangement view. And the reason for that is sometimes I'll use what's called like a reference track, which is basically when you're using someone else's song. It's like a fully finished song and you're using it as a reference. So one reason is like, I want to create in this particular genre, but I'm not like super familiar with like arrangement. I find that to be really handy because you literally can, as soon as this opens, I'll show you, you literally can basically use the arrangement and kind of like mark where different sections are and kind of like create an arrangement based off of that. So here's an example. So this song here, this is my reference track, and I'll just like solo this here. But, right. So this is the reference track, and what's nice is you can just like literally drag in an audio file onto an audio track, and then up here underneath these bar numbers, so I get the speaker icon, you basically can just right click where you want and select add locator, which basically adds these little flags, and then you could be like, okay, this is the verse, and basically drag these around to kind of mark where the song section is, which is, and I can click on this to delete that if I want to. But what's nice about that too is I can, if I want to jump to this section here, I can double click on the locator. Right, so again, I kind of just like use this as a reference or for the arrangement, but I also like to use it to kind of like use my ears to identify what's happening in different sections and maybe like sonically what's happening again if I want to create in a different style. So for example, like what type of instruments are being used, what kind of synth is that, and like I think honestly with that, and we're going to be talking about like sound design today, is that really does take practice of just being like, is that a pluck or is this a pad? And if you're like brand new to it, you might not have no idea what that is. But going to the browser is actually like really handy because they updated the browser a little bit for Live 12. But if I go to sounds and then I go to pad, it will show me the pads, right? So it kind of gives you a general idea of what that sound sounds like. And also if you have, let's say, like a third-party plugin where it's like a synth that's made by a different company, like Serum, for example, oftentimes they'll have like different categories of different sounds, right? And then also like with using reference tracks, you kind of just like are using your active listening skills where you're being a bit more intentional of trying to identify what's happening in the song, like rhythmically and things like that. So that's kind of like what I did here is I added this this song here and used it as a reference. And then in session view came up with, let's say, like on the drum rack here. So, and by the way, if you notice, all of these tracks are kind of like separated out. Before I showed you how to create a drum rack where all of the samples were in one, right? Which is kind of like this. But then what you can do is, let me see. Oh, I actually didn't do that here. Never mind. There's just a lot going on here. Maybe I'll show you actually in the last week, but I don't want to jump ahead. But basically, if you notice, there's almost like, it looks like groups within groups. So basically the idea is like if you have a couple of tracks that kind of belong together that you want to process together, which I'll show you later on. So for example, if you're like, I want to add a compressor or filter effect to like all of these sounds, you can basically just group them into one group. So if I click on this track, hold down Shift, click on, let's say, this track, it's going to select those particular ones. I can then either right click and then select group tracks or type Command G. And then now this is like one group. So basically like that's what I've done over here with the hats is I guess I had like different drum racks here. And then I had like a sample of hi-hats and shakers and things like that. And I just basically grouped them into this hats group. And you can group groups within groups. So basically all of these groups are within this one group called all drums. And then I have this like effects chain that's on the one drum. So I'll go back to that, but I just kind of wanted to explain why this looks a little crazy. But yeah, so essentially like, I kind of came up with, let's go over here actually. So came up with these ideas. And, some of these ideas I didn't keep. I don't think I kept that or like this. Like I didn't keep that either. But I kind of just like came up with ideas. This is kind of like the predominant, the main idea that I liked that I kind of built the song around. Okay, so, and I'm not going to play through all of these, but again, the idea is I just kind of came up with these clips, and then I think honestly what I might have done is I might have then dragged these clips over here because I kind of just wanted to use this reference track, the arrangement, as the reference. So I went ahead and I added these locators, and I kind of just like honestly like fleshed out my ideas here, going through section by section, listening to like, all right, does the kick come in here? Like, I don't know, for example, like there is, like you hear the drums right away, and then you hear like the harmony coming in. And then there's like a breakdown right here. So you hear the kick go away, and a lot of times with dance music, a lot of the arrangement is actually like built around when the kick comes in and when it goes away, because the kick contains low frequencies, which, is the energy, right, of the song. So I basically kind of like use that as the reference, and then, so like, For the drums, for example, I had just like, I have these like shaker loops, hats loop. And then I think I added more texture for the drums in the next section here. Oh, I added snare. Snare and a clap. Right, and then breakdown, kick goes away. And we just have this like filtered clap. Cool. So, and I'm not going to go through every detail, but basically, again, I just kind of use the reference track as an example, and I'll just play you like a snippet of, actually, let's unsolo that. About transitions and like maybe next week.
Leave the lights on, don't leave the lights on. I get lonely when you leave the lights on. I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot shut down. I'm lonely when you leave the lights on. When you leave the lights on. I'm not gonna play through the whole thing, but like I just kind of wanted to show an example of like, all right, it came up with some like core ideas, right? And you can, it doesn't have to be in session view, right? Technically, you could like create solely an arrangement view if you wanted to, but you know, in terms of arrangement, really the idea is like coming up with those like core ideas and then like literally building an arrangement around it, and then you know what makes kind of keeps things interesting is like when elements like come in and then they drop out, and then like you heard this like little fake out thing happening, or is it this one? Hold on. Yeah. Right, where like the kick and the bass drop out, and then there's like some filtering stuff happening. So we'll talk about automation either, thank you, either this week or next week. But like really when things are changing and evolving is how you can kind of keep an arrangement, you know, a little bit more interesting. But yeah, let's go ahead and focus now on sound design stuff. Yeah. So I'm gonna hand you this mic just so people in the chat can hear what you're saying.
Okay, so would using the reference track also be helpful to like get better at mixing?
Yes, I love, hold on, let me cancel that for a second. I love that you asked that because you can literally use a reference track for like anything. But yeah, in particular, I use it for mixing all the time. So for example, like I think with like mixing, a lot of times, especially for dance music, I'm like, what does the low end sound like? And a lot of times it has to do with like what kick you're using, what bass you're using, and what frequencies. It's like basically what space it's taking up frequency wise. So, but yeah, I would definitely recommend using it for mixing because you can kind of like hear why something sounds the way that it does in terms of like how each element, where it's taking up like space, like frequency wise. Yeah, so strongly recommend. Can you do me a favor, so I just grab that mic, thanks. It's okay. Okay, cool, great question. All right, so let's go ahead and open up this one right here. Let's not save that. So I'm not gonna go like super in depth about this, but I can't remember if I called it out last time. But, and again, if you can't read this on Zoom, just refer to the notes on your computer. But Ableton Live added a new feature, which I think is pretty cool. I haven't used it so much yet, but I think it's really interesting that it exists. But basically, they added a category in the browser that says tunings. And this is really cool because essentially, like, it says Ableton Live uses 12 TET, which is like equal temperament, which is essentially like what's used in like Western music. So when we're not going to go like super into theory, but it basically just means that in Western music, note pitches are divided equally into 12 parts per octave. So if you think about C, D, E, or C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, right? So it's basically like 12 notes in an octave, and it's divided equally. But this tuning is often used in classical and Western music. Live 12 supports, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Scala files, which you can load into a live set to use a custom tuning for MIDI notes. But yeah, basically you can incorporate various tuning systems that are used all around the world, which I think is pretty neat. So like, I don't know if I did like tertial, or let's do hijab. And let's do, hold on, I haven't done this in a while. But yeah, notice how this area down here pops up, which is cool. And then over, hi, this track here. Yeah, so I don't know if you recall last week, but there's this, and I'll show it to you in a moment, that usually there's something that says scale and you can choose it, but notice it's just like disappeared. So like, so, you know, obviously this is not just like a piano, so it sounds wonky too, because there's just like a lot of reverb and things going on, but hear how the tuning sounds. Like our ears are like, ooh, that's like different, right? Because it's like not a tuning that our ears are like accustomed to, right? Unless you are accustomed to that particular tuning. And then what's neat is, oh gosh, that siren. Where is it? Okay. Oh, I think I actually might have accidentally tuned that. Yeah, so you can also, no, never mind. So you can also click on this to bypass tuning for this, or it doesn't show. So, oh, now it's still doing. Okay, I actually haven't used that feature, but have you used that actually, Sanaya?
If you do, then it overrides your, you don't see it on the top left anymore.
Right.
And what the thing is, it basically will be clip specific.
It's clip specific. Okay, I'm not going to get into that actually, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I think it's interesting, and then also I just kind of wanted to point your, let me get rid of that. Point your attention to the fact that I added a link here in the notes, which is pretty cool because it basically takes you to a site that Ableton created called tuning.ableton.com, and it's just really cool and nerdy because it like basically goes through all of these different like tuning systems and like how to use this. And you know, Ableton has like a few cool sites like learningableton.com, which like is very like interactive and is like a really cool way to like understand this kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I just wanted to draw your attention to that. But yeah, let's do this. So we're gonna focus on instruments right now, and yeah, instruments and effects. So yeah, I kind of started to create this track again using a reference track this week. I was like really struggling with arrangement, so I was just kind of focusing on coming up with ideas. And again, I kind of started in session view, moved some of these ideas to arrangement view, and then kind of just primarily started working in arrangement view. So I can use this reference track here, but let's just see what we've got.
I feel the tether in my soul. Losing my breath, 'cause I didn't think it go. My
like my intro, and then I came with this drop, which I'm working on. I've never worked in this style before, so I'm just like playing around, but I'm gonna use this as an example of just like using the Ableton stock instruments to kind of sculpt some sounds, but this is gonna sound really crazy, but. Right, okay, so let's focus first on, I might have actually already come up with a drift instrument. I don't remember what this is. Oh, I see, okay. So I'm gonna actually create a new MIDI track, Shift Command T, and we're gonna add drift. So in the browser, in instruments section, here is drift, and this comes with every single version of Ableton Live. And this is like a newer synth that they added, I think the last version. And yeah, if you're curious on more details as how to use this, there's a lot of detailed notes here in the PDF for this week, and then also at the bottom there should be like a link to watch a tutorial on it. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So by the way, we're not gonna necessarily go over like every single synthesis fundamentals concept, because this is not a synthesis course, right? And there's just like a lot of information. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna explain some things, and we're gonna create some cool sounds and kind of like learn as we go. But yeah, and then if you wanna learn more, I also linked some things, I think up at the top here. Ableton's Learning Synth site is pretty cool. And then also there's a whole Art of Synthesis course on FemHouse's site if you wanna learn more about that. But yeah, so with drift, and in general with synthesizers, typically like where you would start creating sound or shaping the sound first is the oscillator section. So OSC stands for oscillator. And so think of it like this is where sound is generated, and this is where you can choose your waveform. And basically the waveform is going to kind of like determine the general timbre or character of the sound. So I'm just going to I can turn oscillators off and on also. That we have two oscillators here, which are going to generate sounds. I'm going to turn off two by just clicking here. So we just have one right now. And actually, is this the right one? Yeah, okay, cool. So this sounds really brassy right now, because of the fact that I can click here and choose these different waveforms. So this is actually what's called a sawtooth waveform, which is nice and bright and brassy. But if I choose, let's say, this sine wave here, I get something that's like really soft and pretty. Triangle is kind of similar, just a little bit louder and buzzier. And then this is like a new one that they added, but it's like shark. I think it's called shark something. And then this one. And actually, if I do shift comma and open up info view, it actually will tell us, or actually just kidding. Some sense it tells you, this one it doesn't, it's fine. And then we've got square. This one's square, this one's rectangle, and this is square. So they're kind of like, square is nice also, because it's kind of like digital sounding, and round, especially if you go lower octaves. Get this like nice bottom type sound. So I kind of want to create something that's a little bit soft. I like that. And this here is just like our level, so it's just like how loud this oscillator is going to be. So I might go back to that later. And then we can also like change the shape. Which, notice how it, like the timbre of it, quality of it changes. It's like brassier, more nasally. I also can change the octaves. So if I can click here, press 1, and take that up. So I actually kind of like that, up an octave. Okay, so there's that section here, and then I might just wait to go back here to oscillator 2, but let's talk about the filter section. So the filter section is essentially like, think of it like, we have all of these frequencies, which are pitches, right? And when we're talking about like a synth and creating a sound, essentially this section here changing, this is the filter knob, or FREQ stands for frequency knob. It's basically gonna change like kind of like how bright or dark a sound is. So actually, so you can actually properly hear this, I'm gonna choose the saw wave. So really bright. And notice as I turn this, the sound gets darker or brighter. The type, it determines the type of filter. So if I click on 2, notice like you'll hear that just like sounds different. I think it's subtle in this case right now. I'm not going to go through every single feature. I'm just going to go through the most prominent ones. And then RES stands for resonance. So this is kind of cool because we can kind of, if I really crank this resonance here, and actually just for fun, just so I don't have to play this the whole time, I'm gonna grab this MIDI clip and just loop this. There we go. So notice as I really crank this resonance, you can hear it's almost like it's like more nasally or like chirpy. And if I play with this filter cutoff, you can kind of like really hear the sound change, which is kind of fun. Cool, so that's filter. And then also we have something called envelopes. So the way that I think about an envelope is just like how the sound is shaped over time every time I play a note. So if you think about like volume, if I like pluck a string on a guitar, you know, as soon as I pluck the string, there's a certain amount of time before like we hear sound, right? And usually it's like right away. It's like the pluck is like immediate. And then, here, let me change this camera right now. So you like pluck the string, the sound is immediate, and then usually like the volume then fades like kind of quickly, but it kind of like rings out a little bit, versus like if you bow a string on, let's say, a violin, it kind of like, there's like a crescendo before it gets to like peak volume. It like takes some time. So think of that as like the attack, like how quickly the sound happens. So how long does it take to go from silence to like that peak volume? And then like the decay and sustain has to do with like, all right, as I'm playing this note, what is the volume? So if I lower the sustain, by the way, you can also like go here to these knobs, or you can adjust these. So if I lower it all the way down, you can hear that the volume is actually lower. I'm holding the note down right now. If I raise this, right? So that's the sustain. In this case, we're also talking about an amp envelope, which is amplitude volume. So we're talking about like volume over time. Yes. I know, thank you. So sorry, you can adjust these knobs here, or you can click and drag these guys over here. So sustain has to do with, and when we're talking about an amplitude envelope, volume over time, and then decay is just like, and this is like a good representation. So this is attack, this is sustain. Decay is like how long does it take to go from peak volume to the sustain stage here. So if I make the decay time really short, it's like pretty immediate. But if I, let's say, increase the decay time, let's lower the sustain so we can really hear that. It takes about 3 seconds for it to go down to the sustain volume. And then release is like how long does it take after I, let's say, so I have to switch back to this, after I release my finger from the key, how long does it take to fade to silence? So if it's like, I don't know, it's a lot, 6 seconds. So it kind of like rings out, right? So, and again, you can kind of like use this to shape the volume. So if I wanted something that's like pluckier, then I probably want like a shorter attack, maybe like a shorter decay and sustain. Or if I want something that's like swells a bit more, I can have a longer attack time. right? And maybe I want to like increase the release if I want something that more ethereal. And that's fun. So we have this envelope here, and then there's actually a second envelope that they have here that you can, so we've been talking about amplitude envelopes, but you can also technically have envelopes, the words modulate, which basically modulate just means like one thing affects something else. So you can have an envelope, let's say like affect the pitch. So like how does the pitch go up and then down? Or maybe you want like the filter cutoff to be modulated. So basically instead of like my finger going like this, right, open up this filter cutoff. So like, right, so I'm like opening and closing this right now, which is changing the sound, and I'm doing it at a certain rate, right? So maybe I'm like slowly opening this up and then closing it really quickly, which like affects how it sounds, right? How it gets like brighter and darker. So we can use, let's say, like this envelope here to like, let's make a longer attack here. And if I go to this section, this tab here that says MOD or modulate, I can, let's say, change this little drop down here to actually, where is it? Envelope 1 or envelope 2? Sorry, envelope 2. And have it click here, and so basically this is the source of what we want to modulate something, and then this is what we want it to modulate. So I can choose, let's say, the low pass frequency, which is the same thing as this. So right, versus so plucky. Let me close this, shorten this tack here. There we go. Versus. So at a certain point, it actually kind of like sounds like a horn, right? Which is kind of cool. So you can kind of like use these envelopes here to like shape something so that it kind of sounds like a certain instrument or just like its own thing. Maybe it's like a sound that doesn't exist in real life. So that is that. And then let's see here. And then we have, actually, before I go to LFOs, let's talk about this section over here. So notice it says pitch, MOD, which stands for pitch modulation. So, and by the way, where does it have it? Over here, this percentage is like how much you're modulating. So if I do it at 100%, that's what it sounds like if I lower this percentage. Kind of hard to tell in this room, but it basically, like, the more the percentage is, the higher the percentage, the more it's modulating. So it just becomes more extreme, I guess. And then, yeah, pitch modulation. So I can also have, I can click here, choose my source, or just have, let's say, envelope 2 affect the pitch. So basically, the pitch is going to change based upon this shape. So it's going to go up, and then it's going to go down, right? So that's kind of cool, because it actually kind of does sound like a horn now, where it's like the pitch kind of like warbles just like a little bit, which is kind of cool. All right, and then let's go to LFO. So LFO also modulates things, but instead of like an envelope basically, like every single time each note is played, it's going to essentially like trigger this envelope. It's going to go through this envelope shape, and then the next time a note plays, it's going to trigger the envelope again. So with LFOs, think of it like continuous, meaning that basically I can choose how fast or how slow the LFO moves. And let's say I'm going to go to this modulate section and have LFO modulate the filter cutoff, or LF frequency. You can hear that, right? So this is cool, and this kind of helps us to understand waveforms a little bit more, because we can actually like hear it kind of going like this. And this is a sine wave, but what if I were to change this to, let's say, triangle, or saw up? Oh, saw down. Or square is cool. And that's fun. And this kind of going fast, so I'm like really like increasing this rate, but if I slow it down, That's cool. And if I really increase this, you get this like really cool, like almost distorted thing happening. And this is set to hertz. So this is just like kind of like, we're not going to get super into that, but it's just like, again, determining how fast or slow it is. But what's cool is you can also click on this like note value here, and it essentially will allow you to sync this LFO or the timing of things with your project's BPM. So if I have this set to eighth note, it's literally going to modulate every eighth note. So like, so if I turn on the metronome, actually, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Let's change that to auto. Or like 16th notes. So that's kind of neat. And then again, if I go back to modulate, this is like really intense modulation, but what if I wanted to like pull this back, just make it super subtle? So, you know, you can kind of like dial it down. And, you know, we can have the LFO modulate like all different types of things, maybe like the oscillator 1 gain, which is like basically this knob here, so how loud it is. You might not hear a huge difference right now, or like oscillator 1 shape, so this knob here, so basically it'd be like me doing this back and forth. Oh. That's interesting. Okay. Now actually let me do this. I didn't mean to choose. I wanted this sound. So I'm gonna go ahead and, go to envelope, and I actually wanted more of a plucked sound here. So we got more of like a pluck sound, right? So, and let's do this. I'm gonna turn on this second oscillator now, and let's choose maybe a different waveform. So I'm gonna choose the square waveform. Oh, that's kind of cool. So this is an octave down, by the way, -1, but what if I were to make this the same octave or an octave up? Actually, there you go. Ooh. It does, yeah. And then I can also detune it, meaning that it's gonna like basically like literally like change the tuning of this oscillator, which will, let's hear what this sounds like. So if we just slightly detune it, that might like make things like slightly wider, which is cool. And then again, we can change the volumes here. So maybe if I wanted to increase or lower the volume. So that's kind of neat. And then we have this noise oscillator here too. So you can kind of use this in different ways. Sometimes like you just want noise for like a little bit of texture. And then I'm not sure how much we'll get into these, but these are kind of fun too. So these are referring to what's called like some of these things like slide pressure is referring to MPE. And I think I have it somewhere in here. Yeah, MPE here. So it's kind of like MPE stands for MIDI polyphonic expression. And so basically it's a feature that allows you to modulate a bunch of parameters at the same time. Such as pitch, timbre, volume, and you can actually modulate them per note. So rather than like modulating it for the whole entire instrument, every single note that you play, so for example, each MIDI note here, I can modulate like pitch and timbre and volume like at the same time per note. And it just basically, in short, it just gives you more expressivity. So, which is why like in certain synths, like you'll see different options here for like pressure, slide, mod wheel. And so, by the way, if I double click here and then go to, so this is the MIDI editor here in clip view. So we have notes, envelopes, which we might talk about next week, and then MPE. So this is kind of cool because notice down here it says pressure, slide, right? So basically you can kind of like change things over here if you wanted to in terms of like MPE. And the idea again is just like it gives you more expressivity. And so like, I don't know, if I were to like have pressure, modulate, let's say, noise gain, let's just, or let's make something more obvious actually. Maybe a LFO, right? Or actually, let's do like low. And slide. So I don't know if you can hear, but it's like basically you can assign it. So if I slide my finger, you can't even see it on in the whatchamacallit in Zoom. But basically, like with the push, it has like pressure, is just like how hard you're pressing on the pads. Slide is like moving your finger like on the pad, and I think maybe Sinai will go over that at some point with the push. But yeah, but basically like you can have like these things assigned to, let's say, like making the sound like brighter or darker, or like you can assign it to different things, so that way when you're like moving your finger around on one pad, it like adjusts the sound or changes the sound, right? Which is cool. All right, so let's move on. And then there's like anytime you see a first drop-down menu, second drop-down menu, the first one just means like, okay, you can have something modulate, if I click on the second thing, or sorry, in this case over here, sorry, something else, right? And then over here, this is still your source, right? And this is just like how much you want to modulate, let's say like the pitch modulation. So even if you're not familiar with the synth, the concepts are all the same, and the layout tends to be like pretty similar. So same thing over here, frequency modulation. So that has to do with the filter cutoff. All right, so, and then lastly, mode here, poly. Poly is just like the ability to play multiple notes at the same time. And then mono means that only one note plays at a time. So if I try to play multiple notes at a time, like a chord, it won't let me. But what's cool about mono is I can adjust this guy here, which is the amount mono thickness, which basically adjusts the relative volume of the 4 mono voices associated with each note. So basically this is what it sounds like. And you can also do things like turn on legato. So basically like notes won't overlap. You can add glide, which basically will glide from one note to the next, one pitch to the next. That's kind of fun. I really like this particular feature. So drift, so this is a detune feature. So you can set the amount of variation per voice. So basically the variation slightly affects different aspects of the voice's sound, such as pitch and filter cutoff, but I feel like it sounds more obvious with the pitch. So anyways, like, I don't know if you can hear it. I can always hear it in headphones. I don't know if I can hear it in this room right now, but the main idea is just like, yeah, playing around with these different options. We can like change the sound, right? And that's like the whole point, until like you kind of like stumble upon a sound that you really like, right? So that's drift. And did I end up using this one at all? Oh yeah. So this is like the sound that I came up with that I thought was cool, and I actually, let's turn down. Okay. So this is the sound, and let's see what I did. So I used, oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm not looking at the same thing you are, so. Yeah, so this instrument I made ahead of time, but so this is drift, and so this is the waveform I used for this oscillator, and then I used a sine wave for the second one. I tuned this oscillator an octave up, and let's see what else I did. So I set the filter cutoff here. And mostly what the sound is doing is I have this LFO played at 16th note rate, so the sine wave here, and it's modulating, it's slightly modulating the filter cutoff, so it's like slightly moving back and forth. So I get this like little wiggle, right? So that's what we're getting here. And that's really, honestly, that's kind of like what's going on. There's not a lot. I kind of changed some of these envelopes here. And then this is where the magic of adding audio effects comes into play in terms of like giving the sound like more sauce, right? So, so audio effects, by the way, if you go into the browser, you can access in this section here, right? Audio effects, and we're not gonna probably have time to go through every single effect, but I kind of just want to show an example of how you can use some of these effects to kind of like sculpt and shape the sound. So I added chorus ensemble, which I really like adding to synths because it helps to like widen the sound. So this, and you can turn these effects on and off by clicking on the button, bypass button here. And then also you can add effects by just like dragging them onto the track. So without the sound, with the sound. So again, I think it's going to be subtle in this room, right? Yeah.
So when you're dragging the effects, it's only adding that effect to that track, right?
So the question was, if I'm dragging the effect onto the track, it's only adding it to that track, correct? Yeah, so if you wanted to add it to everything, you would add it onto the main track. So if I added, let's say, like auto filter, which we'll talk about in a moment, to this track, it's going to add it to everything, right? Right, that sounds wild. So yeah, if you just drag it onto the track, and then also, let me show an example. If like I added, let's say, auto pan, so wherever you drag it, the effects and the order that you place them does make a difference, because it basically, it's like, think of it like a chain. Like the audio goes through this instrument, and then it goes through auto pan, and then it goes through this chorus effect. So that's going to basically determine what it sounds like, versus if I added chorus first, it's going to process the chorus and then auto pan. So sometimes it's interesting to kind of play around with like the order of effects to hear what it sounds like. But yeah, with like chorus, actually, oops, let's do this. So, and by the way, the dry wet is just like how much of the effect that you're applying. So at 100% wet, we're basically hearing 100% of the effect. If I turn this all the way down to 0, we're going to hear none of the effect. And again, it's really hard to hear chorus in a room. You'll probably hear it much better on Zoom if you have headphones on in particular. So by the way, I encourage you to, after this class, like strongly recommend like adding an effect to a track and hearing how that changes the sound, because that's really like the best way to kind of like understand like how does this sound, like what does this effect sound like, because like even with the recording and everything, it's just like it's not going to sound exactly the same as it does like on your computer. So, and particularly with headphones, I think that, you know, with chorus especially, you're not really going to hear this until you put headphones on, and then you'll hear the sound widen. And it kind of like thickens the sound as well, which is cool. So I really like that, this particular plugin. And then also, and this is an Ableton stock plugin, meaning that it comes with Ableton Live, it comes with every single version. And then we have 3 different tabs here, which basically kind of like operates slightly differently. But yeah, this one I actually really like auto pan, because it literally will pan the sound back and forth. So actually we can hear it in this room with the speakers. So if I do 100%, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this rate really fast. Ooh, that's crazy. And then again, this is set to hertz, but if I set it to this note value here, so again, we see some things that are similar in other effects and devices. We can set it to a particular note value, so maybe like quarter notes, or let's actually do this really fast. And we hear some other wiggling going on because there's that LFO modulating the filter cutoff, but here's one of my favorite tricks for auto pan. So you can use it as literally like a panning tool, which gives things more like stereo effect in your mix, but also you can use it as like a sound design tool. So This is like my favorite trick that I like to do where so right now the phase is at 180, meaning that it's like equally panning between the left and right channels. If you had headphones, it would be like the left and the right ear. But if I set it to 0 or 360, it means that I'm basically making what the waveforms are doing exactly the same. So let's change the shape here just so we can really hear this. And actually, so we can hear this a little bit better, I'm going to turn on this LFO. And I might put this on a different sound actually because this is a lot going on. Let me do this with, here, let's do it with, I'm going to put this another drift instrument. I'm just going to go to their stock. And so I can click on, let's say, piano and keys. So that's kind of cool. Sure, 80s tape. So with auto pan, oops. Wait, that's not the one. Where are you? There we go. So let's grab this. Whoa. Let's also switch this. Something like this. Okay, sure. There we go. So that's kind of cool. And then I can change these waveform shapes here too. So like if I have this type of shape, so I just change this back. I can also click on normal to invert this shape. And that's really fun. So that's kind of like a starting point, right, for shaping the sound. And then maybe I'll go to audio effects again and add, let's say like hybrid reverb. And then, yeah, I'm going to add hybrid reverb. I'm just going to change. You can go through these drop-down menus, and I kind of like real places because it basically like they recorded reverb. They captured reverb from like actual spaces. I like by the way, hybrid reverb has like different algorithms you can choose from. I like shimmer because it's kind of like bright sounding. And then you can also go to EQ and basically like if I want to like cut out the mud of reverb, I can cut out, let's say like adjust this here, and this is 100, so 300 is probably like around here. And my one tip here too for like adding effects is like, I think my first mistake when I first started producing was like cranking everything up to like 100. Right, and then it's like everything, it's like it just like gets really muddy and like really chaotic, but like especially with like reverb, you really can be like so tasteful with like adding like small and subtle amounts and then maybe like increasing it a lot for like certain sounds depending upon like what you're trying to do. So yeah, and then let's go ahead and delay. And yeah, so this is the Ableton stock delay, and left and right, so left-right channel. So it basically is going to repeat the sound. And these numbers, by the way, are 16th notes. So if I increase this to say like 4, that's a quarter note. So if I really click on 16, we're going to hear a lot of repeating. Ooh. And that's happening because this option called repitch is on. If the sound is playing, audio is playing while I'm clicking on things, we're going to hear that like repitch sound. But you can click on, let's say, fade, and it's going to fade into the next thing. But my favorite thing, and then feedback is just literally the audio going out and going back in. So you got to be careful with this because if you really crank it, start getting feedback. Yeah, Jamie said it almost sounds like a fast rate auto filter with LFO. Yeah. And then I like this option where it's like you can actually click on this button and unsync the left and right channels. So like basically I can have different delay timings for like the left and the right ear. So I don't know if I did like 3, which is a dotted quarter note on this side, and then 6 on this side. You get just like some interesting things happening. Ping pong is cool too because it'll literally bounce the sound back and forth. Yeah, which is fun. So yeah, that's really neat. Also, yeah, in terms of like different categories of sounds, so I would say like EQ and filtering has to do with like a lot of times it's like used for like mixing and like in terms of like correcting like problem frequencies and things like that. But you can also use it for like sound design reasons. So yeah, if I just add EQ, and I usually like to add that towards the beginning of my audio effects chain. So for example, I'm not going to go super into this, but basically all of these numbers down here refers to just different places in the frequency spectrum where we can either lower the volume for certain frequencies or boost the volume for certain frequencies. And then this drop down here is just going to determine what shape in which you want to cut or boost frequencies. So if I click here and choose, let's say, this second one here, so this is what's considered a high pass filter. So I can basically either click and drag this around, or I can move this knob around. And basically this number here is just telling me at what point am I setting this frequency knob so that it's going to cut any frequencies below this point. So for example, if I'm like, I don't want all of that like low frequency, I want to make room for like, let's say the bass. You can hear as I continuously pull this back, the sound's going to get like thinner and thinner, right? Maybe I don't cut the core quality of the sound, but and it's like, by the way, like what we're seeing here is a visualizer of where the frequencies are present, going left to right. So this is pitch, low frequencies, low pitches, mid frequencies, high frequencies, and then up and down is referring to volume. So the higher those peaks are, the louder the frequencies. And by the way, I can make this nice and big by just clicking on this arrow, and then we get this. Cool. So yeah, so maybe I want to cut that, and then maybe, so band 2. So maybe, I don't know, I don't want this to be super prominent. I can kind of like cut that, and maybe just like really use it as a shaping tool, but use it aggressively as a way of just really messing with the sound. Bless you. Cool. I'm not going to use it right now, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out. We'll talk more about some of these tools like EQ and compressor a little bit next week. Cool. So that is drift. Let's talk about meld. So this is a pretty cool synth that they added. So do I have it here? Yeah, I have here. Cool. So it comes with just the suite version. So if you have an intro version, unfortunately it doesn't come with it, but it's a really cool tool. It's like, honestly, it's like really capable of creating a lot of like cool, like textured and really interesting sounds that are unlike like a real instrument, you know? So like, I don't know, for example, I made this one, this sound. Wait, why is this so quiet? I don't. Oh, I might have just been because I was for mixing purposes. Okay. There we go. And I have some, and then let me actually just show an example of this other sound that I made. Oops, not that one, this one. So you can tell I like really rhythmic sounds. But yeah, so let's take a look at, and then we'll build a sound from scratch, create a sound from scratch. But with this particular one, I just want to actually play this without all of the fancy effects that are happening too, because I added stuff, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so this is actually what it sounds like without all the effects. Kind of sounds like an organ, actually. Cool. And actually what I might do is like go back to this in a moment to kind of show you what I did. And then I'll show you all the effects I added. Okay, so I'm going to create a MIDI track, and let's go to instruments. And let's go, actually I'm just going to search for meld. Oh, clear that filter. All right, meld. Okay, cool. So basically we have, so it's kind of think of like where it says A and B as two different oscillators. Technically, they're like two synths in one. So they're like two different synth engines. And if you're like, what does that mean? You actually like don't need to understand that. That's fine. To be honest, I don't know if I even fully understand it. It just like blows my mind. But there's a lot going on in the synth. And what I will say about using tools where there's just like a lot going on and so many things that you can adjust, with like sound design, I honestly recommend, particularly if you're new to it, just like start simply first. Just like hear what happens when you adjust one thing and how it like changes the sound. Because sometimes I find for myself when I'm like adjusting a bunch of things, I'm like, wow, this sounds like really chaotic, and I don't know if I like where the sound is going. So sometimes I'll just like to kind of like adjust one thing and hear out the same, how it changes the sound, and then if I like that, I'll just like change something else. Yeah, Jamie says in the chat, I made bubbles with meld. It was fun. I'll show you that in a moment. But yeah, so basically we have these two different like engines here. So I'm going to actually turn off B temporarily, B. And actually what I'll do, so I don't have to play something in, is we'll just grab this MIDI clip here. And instead of soloing this track, let's solo this one. So basically we have these different drop downs that we can choose from. So there's basic shapes. So let me actually play through each one. So this is kind of what we heard earlier with like the sine wave. So where it's just like really smooth sounding, right? And then we can basically move these knobs here to change, and they're like one of the most obvious things in the synth where it like will drastically change the sound. So the shape is just going to change basically like what waveform it's going to choose from. So sine, triangle, saw, square, which we saw before. So here the sound starts to change, right? Now it's like really brassy, so saw. So this one now is a square wave. So you can kind of like change through this, and then you'll notice that there is also another knob here. So this one's tone. So that's kind of cool. So you can kind of hear that it's like adding these different tones or harmonics. And then if I click through here and choose a different option, you'll notice that you get like a different option here for like the second knob here. So this one's detuned. So we can still change the shape, but then we can also detune. And this is kind of cool. And notice that now it's like not in tune. But what happens if I click on this button? Ooh. So this is, I mentioned in the last class that they have this like scale awareness option or feature that they added, so that I showed you like the arpeggiator and the chord tool. where you'll see this like option sometimes in the top right corner. So it just basically means anytime you see that, sometimes like with synths, like you can detune things. It basically means that it's like adding these different frequencies that might not necessarily be in the same key or the same scale, right, that you're creating. So that a lot of times like it just sounds weird and like chaotic. But this is cool because if you click on it, it literally will snap frequencies that are not in the same scale into the same key. Yes? So correct, the question is it matching the key that's up here? So this, by the way, is really referring to clips. So technically you can create clips and have them, if I double click here, you can choose different scales for different clips. So, but correct, based upon the clip that you're in or selected, it will snap it to that scale or key, which is really, really cool. Yeah, because like, I don't know, my ears, there's something that happens in my brain when things are just like not in key and I'm just like, I can't, I want to die. So I find this to be helpful. And you can still like, yeah, create these really cool sounds. So there's that. And then I'm not going to go through all of them, but notice how like some of these options too have a flat and a sharp similar to this. So again, it just basically means that it has a scale aware feature. So, you know, without this. And sometimes it still will sound slightly chaotic, but it will sound less chaotic than it would have. And then, yeah, I just wanted to show you, like Jamie mentioned that she created bubbles. I love that they added these like sound design textural things down here. So you literally can create bubbles. It's like so soothing. I love it. But yeah, so let's just try. I'm actually gonna create like maybe something simple here. Choose one of these more simple wave shapes here. And let's just go through some of these options. So again, I'm just gonna start with A here. Or actually, you know what, let's do swarm triangle. Okay, cool. So again, we have envelopes here, and notice how we have two different tabs at A and B, so that's referring to each engine. So we're gonna stick with A right now. Envelopes. So we talked about the amp envelope earlier, which is just like how volume is shaped over time, right? So, you know, again, if I want something that sounds like that, where I'm right now, I'm just like dragging this down and notice how it's adjusting the decay sustain times, and maybe I want to increase the release time. Or maybe I want to increase the attack time, where it swells in. Cool. So why don't we actually will stick with that here. And then we also have this other modulation envelope. So we have a second envelope that we can use to modulate something else, right? So, you know, I can kind of play around with this, and then if I want to assign this to something, I basically can go to, let's say, this what's called the matrix over here. So it says matrix. And we get some options over here, but I just wanted to know, and it's going to look really wild, but if I click on this arrow, it opens up this whole section here. And this will make more sense in just a moment, but basically, like, again, up here is the source of like an LFO or an envelope that we want to affect something else, right? And then these are the things on the left-hand side that I can modulate or affect. So, for example, pitch modulation. Yeah, maybe I want the A or M envelope, which is modulation envelope, to affect the pitch. So just like slightly like modulates, right? We'll go back to that in just a moment, but I kind of wanted to go over some of the things we've already talked about, right? So like filter section. So again, this is just like how it's like making the sound brighter or darker, which is cool. And if I want to, again, modulate this filter cutoff, what if we had, yeah, like the LFO do that? So our LFO section is over here, and we've got LFO1, and again, we have hertz or note, so note value. So if I, or sync, so if I click on this, let's just have, so what's neat too is if I want the LFO to modulate this filter cutoff, if I click here, it actually will show in white over here what I just clicked on, what I want to modulate. Because sometimes I'm like, where is it? So here it is. So let's have LFO1. And maybe I want it to be like subtle. Yeah, question?
Is that number that you're adjusting like the wet and dry knob essentially?
Yeah, so the question is this like number like the wet, dry, and wet knob? Kind of, yeah. So it's like similar to what we saw in Drift where it had like a percentage amount. So it's just like how much are you modulating? So like, it's kind of like if I were moving this knob here at 14, it's like me slightly moving this, going back and forth, where if it's like 100, that would be me like going like that. So if anyone's like ever used any like third-party plugin like Serum, it actually will show you how much like a knob is moving based upon how much the modulation amount is. But yeah, to your point, it is kind of like a dry wet knob, I guess, if you think about it in that way. But the way I think about it is just like if I want it to be subtle, yeah, I guess to your point, yes. Then I would like to make this number really low.
You just went backwards, so there's like a negative option?
There is, so it's just goes in the opposite direction basically.
Okay, so that one has the serum.
Yes. Yeah. So again, it's always good to kind of like play around with things to hear like, ooh, how does that change the sound? And sometimes like you learn things by like doing something. You're like, oh, I can hear how that changed it. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, and then what's neat is, so we have our like basic shapes here, and we can change the shape knob down here. We got some other options with these knobs. And actually, let me, yeah, let's open up this filter cutoff a little bit. Actually, before I get to that, I wanted to point out the fact that there are also different types of filters that you can choose from. So this like goes deep. But we've got, like, you can just like click on them to hear how it like changes the sound. So like phaser, it's kind of cool. Filter is really cool. And notice how what you select here will change the options that pop up here. So drive is just like, usually what that means, you'll see it in like saturation tools like saturators and Ableton Live Effect. And basically when you increase drive, it just kind of like boosts the volume of like mid and high harmonics. So the result is basically like, if you crank it enough, you'll get like distortion, but a lot of times it'll like add like warmth and presence. Right. And then again, these are cool because again, flat sharp means that it has a scalar feature. And that might not be great for this sound, but basically you can kind of just like go through these and kind of hear how it changes the sound. That was cool. Or like home. Oops. Yes, great question. Yeah, so you'll see over here, it says filter macro 1, filter macro 2. And it's interesting that they're called macros because usually in Ableton Live, macros are knobs. But this is the only example where that's not consistent. So yeah, it is referring to these guys here. So yeah, if I wanted to like modulate, let's say like the feedback here of this particular, so I can click here, there we go. And then maybe have like the LFO modulate that. Which doesn't sound great in this example, but maybe like, I don't know what a stamp do. Not much, but yeah, but basically that's related to that. Cool, and then this is kind of neat too. Oh, and also, before I forget, so we can also go here to basic shapes, and we have some like different options now. So like ramp, change that shape. That's kind of cool. Let's make this, whoa. Let's try Wander. So it kind of makes it a little warbly too. That's an interesting sound. Actually, I'm gonna go back to filter. Alternate. So again, get this like kind of cool rhythmic sound. Euclid. Pulsate. That's cool. So yeah, and then we have this like additional LFO1 effects option here, which basically kind of like lets you further affect how like the LFO is working. So let's do some like really obvious stuff like sample and hold. And what's cool is you can actually like have this LFO1 FX modulate something. Like notice it pops up to appear like individually. So I don't know if I wanted to do like motion. So this knob here. So that sounds wild. Or maybe just yeah, so you can kind of just like have things modulate other things in like a different way, right? Which is kind of interesting. But, and actually I'm gonna change, so what we're gonna do is I'm also gonna have another LFO modulate this knob here. So we have another LFO here. I'm gonna click on sync and maybe let's set this to like 1 bar. And, oops. And I want it to affect the spacing. So LFO2. That's an interesting sound. Maybe let's do this over like 4 bars. Whoa. Wow, that's interesting. There's a lot of things going on. Okay, and this is just one synth engine right now, right? Now, what's gonna happen when I click on this one, and I don't know, let's add in something else. Maybe let's add in this like harmonic FM, and then I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna pitch it up, let's say like an octave. Actually, before I do that, let me tone down some of these things. Cool. So with this particular engine now, so we have second tab, right? So it's tab 2. So, I can go to envelopes and again, kind of like shape these envelopes. And then also shape this filter cutoff independently. And actually, to begin with, I'm gonna have like the LFO modulate the ratio. And what I can do is like, so there is a separate LFO section, but if you notice, there's like a cross modulation section over here, meaning that I can have, like, let's say the LFO 1 in A, right? Engine A, modulate this knob here, and basically it can have like an LFO and 1 synth modulate another thing in synth 2, which is really cool. So like, let's see, LFO 1, and then we're gonna have it modulate this. Actually, let me go back here and see what LFOs we have. I'm gonna have this be a little bit slower. All right, let's go back to B. So LFO1, modulate, actually the ratio, there we go. And if I just want to hear this, I can click this off. And then maybe let's just like have like LFO here, B, modulate this filter cutoff here, and so on, right? So, what is it? Filter here. Do this kind of thing. And this sound honestly sounds so crazy. But I'm going to show you an example of something that I actually spent time making. So let's just see how I made this one here. Okay, and actually let's, I'm going to talk about return tracks in just a moment, but let's pull this reverb down. Cool. So basically, like we have, I chose noisy shapes here, so let's just hear this by itself. And so it has these two options here. Let's open this up just so we can see what's happening. So, and there's not a lot happening, to be honest, but I have like, and again, sometimes I think it's good to keep it simple, but I have this LFO1 effects here with the slew up, modulating the filter cutoff. So it's really subtle. And then I have this LFO2 modulating the oscillator macro 2, so this one right here. Oh, and there's one thing I want to point out, and then we've got this engine here where we have LFO1 effects, modulating filter cutoff, and then LFO2 modulating these two macros here. But yeah, I really like this section over here, tone, because it basically allows you to kind of think of it like an EQ tool. You can like cut out low frequencies or vice versa. So for example, if I was like, there's a lot of bass in this, basically I can, like right now I'm cutting out the lows. So you can kind of like just use that as like an EQ tool, which is kind of fun. And like in terms of like my chain here, I've got, this is not a Ableton stock plugin, but I have an EQ here, which is like cutting out around 450 hertz because I wanted to make room for the vocal. And then I've got micro shift, but again, we can just kind of like add chorus, right? So this is what micro shift sounds like by a Sound Toys. Just like slightly widens the sound, but you can add chorus. And then I really want to talk about this next plugin here because I'm a big fan. This next effect called Roar. So this is like, I would say like probably one of the like coolest adds that they added to Live 12. You can kind of think of it like a saturation tool. When I mean saturation, like there technically is an Ableton Live effect called Saturator. Which basically, again, here's that drive knob. It basically will, you know, boost, dB is referring to volume, it boosts the volume in like the mid to high range. So it actually like will technically make it louder, but it like adds some like a little bit of grit sometimes depending upon how far you drive it. So Roar technically is like a saturation tool, but it's like also so much more, like it just like will, you know, really allow you to use it as like a sound design tool to really drastically change the sound. So like, so with it on, Do you hear like that changes the sound? And that's really cool. Let's just actually do this. I'm gonna add this to like a different sound so we don't have to hear the same sound like over and over again. Let's do this to maybe like the drums would be kind of cool. So let's just solo this. So yeah, I think there already is a chain on here. I'm gonna turn that off. And like, I'm just gonna turn this up for now. Actually, we don't need to turn it up. I think that's still audible. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go into audio effects, and yeah, by the way, I think this only comes with Live Suite. But yeah, it's really neat. So again, we have this drive knob, but down here is where we can kind of choose the routing, which basically really will change by a lot, like what you can do with Roar in terms of like the sound design, and it will like basically determine what you see over here. So like if I change this to, let's say, like multi-band or like mid-side, we just get like different tabs basically. So you get the same, you get the same knobs over here, but you get different tabs. So like if I choose like multi-band, for example, so I'm just gonna increase the drive a little bit. So again, this is just like kind of like driving the signal. One thing to note is that typically if I'm increasing the drive, I'm also increasing volume. So I just wanna maybe pull down the output a little bit to compensate. Like basically we don't wanna drive this so hard that this starts clipping or this turns red, right? Because at a certain point, it's gonna just distort the sound and not sound good. So like, yeah, maybe I wanna turn this up to like, let's just turn this up to 11 and then also turn this down accordingly. And we can kind of turn this up just so we can hear it. So, okay, so cool. We have like this tone knob here as well, right? Which kind of like acts like, kind of like an EQ type tool. So we have, here we have 3 different tabs, so low here. So I can go ahead and, you know, like increase this amount. Ooh. And actually I'm gonna turn this off for a moment. So basically what I'm doing here with these 3 tabs is I'm like basically adding saturation individually to each part of the frequency band. So I showed you with like the EQ device earlier that this is indicating what like low frequencies, mid frequencies, high frequencies, right? Right? So this is like low frequencies down here. And, you know, Shaper, this is kind of cool too, because we can kind of like choose like different options here. And it's going to change the sound. So 2 preamp. Ooh, get this like bit crusher. I kind of like 2 preamp. And then we can set this like frequency here. So maybe we'll like emphasize. So like, oops. I'm gonna close all this stuff here just so we can see this guy here. Yeah, so, but yeah, frequency just defines the cutoff frequency used for the filter of like where it's like adding like the saturation. So maybe I want to do like 70. And then mid. So basically, again, I'm processing these different like bands differently. Ooh, that's cool. So and we can adjust the level. So level compensates the output level signals for this gain stage. So basically, these are all like different gain stages. Hit crusher. Oh, that's kind of cool. And then like highs. You can also apply different types of filters. But yeah, anyways, there's just like a lot, there's like a lot that's in here, but I think that the thing that also like will result in like the biggest changes of sound is choosing the routing and then like adjusting these guys here. And then also, so without this, and let's actually, is you can also play with this like feedback. So, you know, again, it's like, I'm kind of like, you could use this in a way where it's like actually like adjusting the sound in like a tasteful way. It's like not completely changing the drums, or you can use it in a way where you're like, I'm here to fuck things up. Like I really just want to like completely change the sound, which is really cool. So yeah, if you have access to Aurora, I would encourage you to play with it. Yeah, I even like with that sound that I created, this is like a song, I guess, that I started, you can't really hear much of a difference in this room, but I remember when I like added it, I was like, without it, oh no, that's not, I added it, where is it, we're over here, I added it, it just kind of like really boosted those like mids and like added some like grit and like texture, and you know, and that's kind of like the whole fun of this stuff is like it like allows us to get a little bit more detailed and nuanced with our sonic shaping, you know. Cool. So one last instrument that I'll go over, and then we'll take maybe a look at some like practical examples of effects processing and return tracks, is granulator. So again, this comes with specifically with Suite version, but basically it is a granular synthesizer, meaning, let's go back over here. It basically like loops and modulates really tiny snippets of sound to create like a whole other new textured sound, essentially. So it's really great for like creating pads and textures. I'm not gonna go like super depth into this, but basically the idea is like you can either just like drop a sample in here, or this is kind of cool. You can if you go to where it says source, external in, you can choose like another track. So if I were to do, where's the meld atmosphere? Which is the one that I just, this one here. And then you can choose the length of time that it's going to capture. And so then I can just click here and, oops, I didn't solo that. There you go. Did it not? Hold on. Source. Okay, actually, let's do this one. I did it earlier. My voice, so I think I soloed the wrong track. This tuned one here. And then source, I can choose that track.
I feel untethered in my soul.
Okay, now it's doing some weird things because it was doing it before, and for some reason is not doing it now. Okay, that's okay, because actually what I wanted to do was do external in and record myself, and I think I might just use my MacBook Pro microphone. Hello. If I were to hello. Yeah, so input one should work. Okay, I see something happening here. So if yes, something's happening. Cool. Okay. Let me cancel that. It's Friday and we are here. And that's what's happening today. Okay. There we go. And I don't think the volume was that loud. Hold on. And it was my MacBook Pro mic, so it might have not picked up the best audio. Which is kind of cool though, because what we could do is just like literally like mess around. Like I can choose the positioning of this. Scan is how fast it'll scan through it. Grain size. So basically it's like combing through this audio. It's kind of cool. And I kind of want to choose that vocal again because it sounded really cool earlier. So you can cancel this, and I'm gonna just try it one more time. There it is. Okay, I don't know why it wasn't working before. Okay, so I can choose this position. There we go. Which is kind of fun. And again, the grain size is just like how it's like combing through this. So like the bigger the grain size, the more of the grain that it's grabbing, right? The tinier. Kind of sounds like that. And kind of like mess with these settings here, like shape. What's that? So no, so you can actually just like, actually maybe I should show this. I just wanted to show an example of the ability of being able to capture audio from basically other tracks. Yeah, or you can use like your microphone, but technically you can just throw a sample in here. So yeah, if I were to just like basically just grab like, I don't know, like, I'm just gonna grab. It's capturing audio. So the audio is always going to be a waveform. MIDI is just like, oh, I see what you're saying. Like if you record this, yeah. So it's going to be, because it's technically a MIDI instrument, so it would show up in the MIDI clip as MIDI. So it's kind of similar to, I guess we'll talk about Simpler next week, but Simpler is an Ableton Live instrument, which technically is a MIDI instrument, but it's also a sampler, so technically it's triggering audio. Yeah, it's triggering samples. So yeah, if I were to grab, like, let's just say a sample, we'll grab, this is a good one actually, because there's a lot going on in this one. So loud, let's lower this volume. And I can change the position. And here's one of my favorite things about this is you can change these like modes here. So classic, loop. I really like this cloud one. I don't know why. It just sounds really cool. Also, if you like lower the grain size and scan, you get these like really cool rhythmic results. And then yeah, basically like just like last thing about this is we have like these options down here, and this basically is referring to modulation. So again, the same themes that we've been talking about, right? Where basically like adjusting key, which is like really pitch. So lower pitch to higher pitch would change how it's like basically modulating this like grain size. Which is cool. And then you can choose like slide, again, pressure is referring to MPE, which will also, I believe, adjust the grain size as well. You have LFO over here as well, which you can have modulate different things. But yeah, but it's like really, it's really cool. I just like, I'm a big fan of like granular synthesis in general. You can get some like really cool, really interesting, weird sounds. And that's the whole point of this, right? Okay, cool. So last thing that I'm going to touch on is just like kind of the idea of like using using like the like instruments and effects and kind of like shaping your sound. And again, I'm like a huge proponent of reference tracks. So if you're like, I really love the sonic quality of this sound and like the aesthetic of it, and I really kind of want to emulate something like that, I would encourage you to throw just like song in your, and you don't have to do that. You can also just like go back and forth between Spotify or SoundCloud or whatever, and just like really start using your ear to kind of determine like what kind of like chord synth is that, and like maybe could I like try to emulate that. Oh, what's happening here? Cool. It's a full moon. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, now it's normal. That was weird. But yeah, so and I think like over time, like, and I feel like my ear is still developing all the time, is I'm getting better and better at doing that. But yeah, so like in this song, let's just kind of like use this as like a breakdown for kind of just like also like what effects are on here and like what instruments I used here. So I mean, in the most part, I think I did use third-party plugins for my sound. So like the main, let's see, the main chords here. Where is it? Which I guess would be the drop. These stutter chords here. Let me hide these for a moment. So that is Serum. And again, I'm also like, I've been going over how to create sounds from scratch, but I'm also like, if you like a preset, that's totally cool. That's totally fun. I use presets all the time, but I think like understanding the language is really helpful, because sometimes it's like, this sound is too bright, so I want to make it less bright, and like, you know, having that knowledge of like, oh, okay, I just need to like maybe like turn down that like filter cutoff or the frequency knob so that the sound is not as bright, is helpful knowledge to kind of like guide you to how to change the sound. But yeah, so like I really like, and like maybe, sorry, what was the question? Oh, thank you. I did not use stacks for this. I think I might have just used my ears. And again, it's just like one of those things, it's just like whatever works, right? So this is, oh wait, I wanted to turn these off for a moment. So I would say this was like with no effects, but technically Serum has an effects section. So there is chorus, and we talked about chorus a little bit today. So chorus basically, again, is a effect that helps to like widen the sound and thicken it a little bit. So it's great for synths. It's great for vocals. Compressor, I think we'll maybe talk a little bit more next week, but compressor basically helps to manage the dynamics. So if you think about like volume of a sound and how that changes over time, right? So there's like if I sing something, it'll be really quiet and then it'll get really loud. So a compressor helps to like kind of manage those peaks in volume, so that way the differences between the less loud sound and the loudest sound isn't so drastic, right? It'll like kind of bring the loudest part down a little bit so that the less loud part, the quietest part, and the loudest part is closer together. So this compressor here is basically kind of like managing those dynamics. EQ, again, like manages like frequencies. In this case, yeah, it's like cutting below 229 hertz. Delay, which we heard before, reverb, which basically helps to place a sound in a space. So we've got some effects here, but then I added EQ, which I'm just like really, maybe we'll talk about this next week. I'm really just cutting in certain areas to make room for other sounds. We've got tremulator, which basically kind of like, it's like volume going up and down. Tremolo, which helps to kind of like further create this like feeling of stutter. And then maybe we'll talk about this more next week, but this is I have a compressor on here, but I'm really using it more for side chain compression. So in Ableton Live, if you click on this arrow on compressor, you can turn on side chain, and then you can basically you can select where you want the audio to route from. So basically what that means is it's like the compressor is, instead of like listening to audio on its own track, it's listening, I have like the kick selected on the drum rack track, so it's like listening to the kick. And so every time it hears the kick, the volume on this track ducks or lowers, which basically makes it so that we can hear the kick better, but then it also creates a really nice kind of like pulsing sound, you know, and I think in this case the threshold is not super low, but if I really crank this down, you can hear it, right? And you hear that a lot in dance music. There's like a lot of sidechain compression going on. So yeah, there's that sound. And then do we have much going on here? Okay, this is another example of sound design here. So here I have meld. And, oh, here it is. And again, I don't know if I have, I don't have a ton going on. This is kind of like points to the fact that you don't need to have a lot going on if you don't want to. But I wanted like kind of like a metallic-y type of synth. So I chose harmonic FM. I played around with the amount and ratio knob, turned on the swarm sign, did the same thing here. Created like a pluck sound by having a quick attack, shortening the decay and lower the sustain. Just chose I chose this like vowel filter option. And then, just basically had the LFO modulate this macro, this envelope modulate that, and then added chorus, added echo, hyper reverb. So it kind of just like adds like a little bit of vibe, right? What else do we got going on here that we can, a lot of these are, I think, pads. So that's serum. This one, okay. I can show this one. So this is a wavetable synth, which comes with Suite. Which we didn't go over this, but again, same of the concepts apply, where it's just like I chose a waveform, I set my filter cutoff, this kind of looks similar, actually, not this. This looks similar to meld, little matrix, right? So I have an LFO modulating the filter cutoff, and kind of like sculpted my sound here, right? And then cut out below like 100 hertz. added chorus, added echo, so without it. And notice how I did the same thing here where it's like I have like different timings for the left and right side, right? So again, like you can kind of like use these things to add some like little detail and like nuance to the sound. Yeah, and then just like last thing, I'm gonna talk about return tracks really quickly, but yeah, we'll talk about vocals actually next week. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is like if you go to view, and then go to I never use this menu, but go to return tracks, which there are just so many options now. Wow. It's Option Command R, but for some reason I don't see it here. I don't know why I don't see it, but anyways, it's up here somewhere. But it's Option Command R. So basically, return tracks is like a great way to route audio. In like most cases, I would say like I would encourage you to like set up return tracks for like reverbs and delays, and you can add like other things there. But basically, it's like a way of like, if let's say I have like a bunch of vocal tracks that I want to send to like a big reverb, or to like maybe there's another return track where I have like a smaller reverb, rather than adding those effects onto every single track, right? You can basically make it so that you're routing the audio from those tracks all into the same reverb track, return track, for example, or delay track. So that's kind of like what you're seeing here is I have a smaller reverb. And again, this is a third-party plugin, but this is Valhalla Vintage. I have a large one. I have, maybe I'll talk about that next week if we have time, a delay, a couple different delays. And then like you can have one for like, let's say like synths or something. And basically, you'll notice that we have these send knobs, right? And they're corresponding, these letters are corresponding to these here. So what that means is like this vocal here. I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot shut down. So you can see B and D. This knob here is indicating what's being sent to this large verb and this delay. And so the amount that it's increased is like basically like how much you're applying the effect. And so I don't know if I were to pull this down here, or actually I think I did that wrong. Oh, it's this one. There we go. I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot shut down. So that's great. And then if you want to add return tracks, you can just go to Create, Insert Return Track, and then it's over here. But I don't know, for some reason I feel like it never did this before, but in Live 12, when I'm in full screen, it doesn't let me scroll over. I have to go like this. Okay. So yeah, basically I can double click here and then just like add, oh my god, this is so crazy. Add an audio effect. Okay, you get the idea. You can add an audio effect basically onto here. And actually, I am going to do that because why is this being so stubborn? Okay. Oh, yeah, you can change the color by just right-clicking and then selecting the color. Yeah, I like to be, especially as I continue to work on a track, I like to be really organized with like my groups. And then, so the groups, creating groups is not only a great way to like process certain effects together, like you can add an effect onto a group, but also it's a way of just like visually being able to see what belongs together. Yeah, like if I were to add, this is so crazy. I don't know why it says like that. I feel like in 11 it like wasn't so hard to do this if you had a lot of tracks going into. Anyways, but the idea is actually maybe let's just do this because I'm not going to save any of this stuff. Yeah.
So as soon as you get the letters in there, you don't need to route anything complicated. You just open up how much from
Correct. So yeah, it's like really simple in Ableton Live. And one thing I wanted to note is like, yeah, if you do end up adding an audio effect, so like I'm just gonna add reverb or hybrid reverb on here. You just want to make sure that the wet amount is at 100%, because basically like the send knob is your dry wet. So if you have this set to less than 100, that just means that you're not actually applying the full amount of reverb or whatever. Cool. But yeah, any questions?
What do you call like your whole thing group? Do you have another name of how to remember what this is called? Just sense. So for some reason, sense just always.
Okay, so the question was like, how do you remember what the return tracks are? Well, first of all, these knobs say sends. So if I'm like, these are the sends, it's like sending the signal to the return tracks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of like once you're on your vocal, how do you, and you don't see all of what you name A through.
Oh, okay.
Is it like a hover? Like, does it show you?
The question is like, how do you know, like if I have, like if there's like a big project like this where I have like so many tracks? No, so what I usually do is I hide and show different parts of the screen. So Option Command R is a really good key command to learn, because usually what I'll do is if I'm like, yeah, I have, okay, so I have my vocal, right? So B and D. And if I'm like, wait, which one was like the large reverb? I'll just like hit Option Command R, and then I'm like, okay, B. Option Command R, and then yeah, go back. So again, learning those hotkeys are really important. Cool. Any other questions in person, from the chats?
I have a question.
Can we hand the mic just so people in the chat can hear?
So my question is regarding some of the reverb that you were doing. Like if we can go for an example with your vocals, I want to add like a reverb tail, like so resampling and like going backwards, making that whole thing. Could you?
Oh, you want to talk about resampling? So we're actually going to be talking about resampling next week.
All right, perfect. I'll send
Yeah,
you a
if you want to know how to create, if you want to like add a lot of reverb to your voice and just like have just the tail, we can talk about that maybe. So like, I think that's a cool trick. We'll talk about resampling next week. Yeah, because we're going to talk more about like tracking vocals and vocal processing, and yeah, and then more about sampling and resampling. But yeah, I just wanted to point this out because I thought it was really cool when I learned it. But if you notice, I have a couple of return tracks that say sidechain verb and sidechain delay. So basically what that means, and I'm not going to get into what this whole thing is, this looks crazy, but this is basically a rack. But think of it like I just have reverb, right? So this could be Ableton stock reverb, that's fine. And then notice how there's a compressor right after it. So basically, with side chaining, again, it's listening to another channel, right? So in this case, I'm having it listen to the vocal group. And then basically, again, we could talk about compressor next week, but basically the ratio is how much it's going to compress. The attack is like how quickly the compressor responds. And then the threshold is like at what point, at what volume level, once it goes above the volume level, is it going to start compressing. So if I really like pull this down, basically what we're going to hear is it's going to prioritize that vocal, right? So we're going to hear the clarity of the vocal, but then we're going to hear the reverb, right? Jamie said, I will try this. The vocal ducks under the reverb. Exactly. Well, actually, it's the opposite. The reverb ducks under the vocal, right? So I don't even know if I did on C, if I did this right. C. And actually, let me pull down. Oh, this is the wrong one, but that's okay.
I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot.
And then what happens if I pull this up?
I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot shut down. I'm lonely when I turn.
I think you can really hear this well too if it's like, yeah, if it's like a really long, like a huge space, let's just do something like this. Oh, oh, okay. I was like,
I'm lonely when I turn the lights on. I see too much, I cannot shut
right?
down. I'm lonely when you leave the lights on.
And I'm doing this like really aggressively, but we like hear like when the vocal goes away, the end of the phrase, we start to hear that tail. So yeah, we're gonna stop because it's 6:10. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that because I think that was like when I learned that I was like, whoa. We'll talk about automation next week, but yeah, that's like another way in which you can like automate the wet and dry amount of reverb. But I don't know, I like using this because I think it's a little bit easier rather than you having to go through your whole arrangement automating every single reverb tail. Yeah, totally. But yeah, lastly, just the assignment for this week is really just to utilize the Ableton Live synths that are available in whatever version of Live you have. I mean, you can also use whatever synths are at your disposal, just like applying the concepts that we went over and just like, yeah, try to shape a sound from scratch. Yeah, and try to drag, I mentioned rather than dragging like the preset, dragging just like the name of the synth onto the track, which is like the stock synth. And then yeah, add effects to the synth to see how it changes the sound. And yeah, just make a song that's at least like 16 bars long. But yeah, any questions? We all good? Yeah.
When you say it says rather than dragging a preset name onto the track, does that refer to the synths that are like the ones with the names that are already?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know why this is like not, hold on, letting me do this. Oh, thank you. I forgot that I'm zoomed in. What's sad about this is that, sorry, I'm just gonna do this, is that I'm so used to zooming at 150% that when I'm at home, I'm like, everything looks so small, and it's like actually not that small. But yeah, I just mean that, sorry if you can't see this on Zoom, but yeah, this is basically this like the stock synth, right? Meaning that no one's changed the sound. If you click here, all of these are presets, meaning someone's basically taken the synth and like tweaked all of the different knobs, yeah. But also you can like add tracks that are presets as well, and that's totally fine. Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
So when you have, let me give you this. Thank you.
Just to confirm with the sends and the return track, so when you have your effects on the return track and you're trying to apply it on that, sorry, I don't know if it's like the track, but you turn on the send for like, for example, for like C, and that's going to correspond to your C return track, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to ask.
Yeah. So think of it like if you were to add an effect, yeah, an effect onto a track. Sorry, I have to zoom out again, apparently. It's so crazy. It just means that like, it's kind of like similar to the fact that you normally would get like a dry wet knob, right? So think of like your send knob as a dry wet knob.
Okay.
But yeah, correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you automate the sense?
Question is, can you automate the send? So yeah, we'll talk about automation next week, but automation is basically the idea that you can change something over time. And like, let's say the arrangement, but correct. Anything that you can right click on and it gives you the option to show automation, you can automate. So you can be like, yeah, automate this amount. Cool. All right. Yeah, and thank you, Sanaya, for fielding the questions. Any questions that came up that would be worthy?
To rediscuss, I mean, I've answered all of them, but let's see, maybe.
Just for those who are not in the Zoom and are going to be watching the recording, maybe.
We had a lot of questions about sampling.
Oh, a lot of questions about sampling.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
Questions about sampling, and I'm just thinking if there's something that relates directly to what you just covered.
Okay,
I
it's
don't
regarding
think
the
so.
sampling. I think I should have the ability to like look through the Q&A questions. I think it like populates and on yeah, anyways. That's my information. So I might go through those and then like we can touch on this maybe next week. Cool. But yeah, so we're gonna end the Zoom, but then for those of you in person, Sanaya is going to teach a little demo on Push, and you guys can be hands-on and learn some cool things. But yeah, for those of you on Zoom, we'll see you next week. We're gonna talk about a little bit about vocal production and just recording and sampling and mixing. That sounds like a lot, so I don't know if we're gonna get to everything, but we're gonna try. But yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you next week. Bye, Jamie and everyone else on Zoom. Yay.